Good morning. This is Omni View, episode 126. It's July 28th, 2026, and as always, we're covering what happened from every angle. Let's look at the day's news from every angle. U.S. states now shoulder rising costs for food assistance, creating direct pressure to trim recipient rolls. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act altered federal food stamp funding so states cover a larger share of program costs. This change gives states a financial reason to reduce the number of people approved for benefits. The policy applies nationwide and affects how state budgets handle enrollment. States must now pay a bigger portion of the benefits themselves rather than relying on the previous federal matching arrangement. The shift began after the bill passed and is already showing up in state fiscal planning documents. The Economist reports that the funding shift leaves states with growing bills and a built-in motive to lower participation. State officials must now balance their own budgets against the same program rules that previously drew more federal dollars. Federal lawmakers who backed the measure argue it encourages efficiency and prevents long-term dependence. Critics at the state level note that administrative costs rise even as federal support shrinks, leaving less room for outreach or error correction. The reporting highlights that enrollment decisions once funded mostly at the federal level now carry immediate state-level budget consequences. One position holds that tying more costs to state budgets will prompt tighter eligibility checks and reduce waste, because local administrators see the direct fiscal impact and can adjust enrollment practices accordingly. The opposing view maintains that the same incentive structure risks denying aid to eligible households when states face revenue shortfalls, since the penalty for over-enrollment now lands squarely on state treasuries rather than being shared with the federal government. Both arguments rest on the undisputed fact that the federal contribution per recipient has declined under the new formula. What happens next? Enrollment decisions will continue to reflect these new state-level budget pressures, and observers can track whether caseload changes align with economic indicators or with new verification procedures. Shifting now to France. Authorities ordered the removal of people from campsites, holiday parks, and residences near La Canaille on the Atlantic coast. The move responds to forecasts of stronger winds that could spread fires already burning in the region. Evacuations began as weather conditions deteriorated. Nearly 4,000 individuals from tourist sites and leisure facilities were directed to leave. The operation focused on areas where summer visitors concentrate in large numbers. AP coverage describes the scale of the operation and the focus on tourist sites where large numbers gather in summer. Local emergency services emphasize rapid removal to avoid entrapment if flames advance. National weather agencies highlight how dry conditions and wind patterns have increased fire danger across southwest France this season. Officials coordinated transport and temporary shelter for those displaced from the campsites and holiday villages. What happens next? Officials will monitor wind speeds and fire spread to decide when residents can return. Meanwhile, a magnitude 7.1 quake hit Japan's southern island of Kyushu, centered near Kumamoto. The Japan Meteorological Agency issued a tsunami advisory for coastal areas. No immediate reports of widespread damage or casualties have been confirmed. The shaking was felt across the region, triggering standard safety protocols. Early warning systems activated seconds before the strongest tremors arrived. AP reporting notes the location on a seismically active zone and the standard advisory procedures that follow such events. Local authorities focus on checking infrastructure and transport links, while residents follow established earthquake drills. The agency's early warning systems provided seconds of notice before shaking reached populated areas. Coastal communities received alerts about possible tsunami waves even though no major inundation has been recorded so far. What happens next? The tsunami advisory will be updated as sea level data arrive, and damage assessments will determine any need for further aid. In Congo, health workers continue daily monitoring in areas where Ebola has appeared in the past. Teams visit households, collect samples, and track contacts to catch new cases early. The effort runs across multiple provinces with limited staff, Surveillance includes repeated testing in remote villages and long travel between sites. The work continues even when overall case counts remain low. Reuters describes the routine of these teams, including long travel distances and repeated testing in remote villages. Health Ministry statements stress the importance of sustained vigilance even when case numbers are low. International partners supply equipment and training, yet local capacity remains stretched during simultaneous outbreaks of other diseases. The teams maintain records of every contact to allow rapid isolation if symptoms appear. What happens next? Continued sample processing and contact tracing will determine whether new clusters emerge. Engineers have concluded that current battery technology cannot deliver the energy density needed for long-distance passenger flights in large planes. Manufacturers are therefore developing hybrid systems that combine electric motors with conventional engines for shorter routes and efficiency gains. Full battery power remains impractical for carrying large passenger loads over long distances. The industry is testing hybrid configurations on smaller aircraft first. Regulators are examining how to certify these mixed power designs for commercial use. The Economist outlines the physical limits of battery weight and range, showing why full electric designs remain impractical for most commercial routes. Industry groups point to successful hybrid tests on smaller aircraft as proof that incremental progress is feasible. Regulators are reviewing certification standards that would apply to these mixed power designs. The shift reflects engineering assessments that batteries alone cannot meet the power and weight requirements for wide-body jets on typical ranges. What happens next? Testing on smaller aircraft will continue while certification frameworks are developed. Now, some progress worth knowing about. The government announced changes to land use taxes that will apply to certain energy firms. The adjustment aims to ease costs for projects in designated sectors while maintaining revenue collection elsewhere. The new rates target specific companies rather than offering a broad exemption. Implementation begins in affected regions immediately. The policy preserves the overall tax structure outside the listed categories. Reuters notes the targeted nature of the change, which covers specific companies rather than a broad exemption. Energy Ministry statements frame the move as support for stable domestic supply. Local governments will implement the new rates and report revenue effects. The adjustment focuses on firms involved in energy production and transmission. Government documents list the sectors covered and the expected duration of the lower rates. One limitation is that firms outside the listed categories continue under the prior rates, so benefits remain concentrated rather than economy-wide. Revenue collection continues at the previous levels for non-qualifying entities. Now, to really understand this story, there's something most coverage leaves out. Most coverage treats food stamp changes as simple budget cuts, yet the real mechanism lies in how matching rates between federal and state governments alter incentives at the administrative level. When the federal share of costs drops, states must either raise their own spending or tighten eligibility screening to stay within fixed budgets. The second option carries lower political visibility than tax increases. Historical shifts in Medicaid matching rates show the same pattern. States responded by adjusting enrollment procedures rather than openly cutting benefits. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act changed the federal contribution formula in a way that makes each additional recipient more expensive for state treasuries. Knowing this, when reports cite falling caseloads after a funding change, readers can check whether the drop tracks economic conditions or coincides with new state-level verification rules. One concrete step is to compare a state's published enrollment numbers against its unemployment rate over the same period to see whether the two still move together. Another check involves reviewing state budget documents for any new administrative procedures introduced alongside the funding shift. These documents often list the exact matching rate percentages that determine how much each state pays per recipient. Cross-reference primary government budget documents with reporting from multiple outlets to separate announced policy from actual enrollment effects. Primary sources often contain the exact matching rate formulas that secondary accounts summarize. If you want to go deeper on the food stamp changes, compare how The Economist and Reuters are covering the story. Tomorrow, watch for updates on whether the tsunami advisory in Japan is lifted or extended based on new sea level data. That wraps up today's Omni View. Remember, the best informed people read more than one perspective, and the calmest ones know that most days, somewhere, something is quietly getting better. For full source links, check out today's written briefing on the Omni View Summaries page. Share this with someone who values fair coverage. See you tomorrow, and if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at Nara Network. Links in the show notes. Quick tip from the network. Try the Do Positive Pod next. Good news in science and tech, plus one concrete action you can take. Every Nara Network show is free at naranetwork.com. The age of AI puts real builders on the phone with an AI host. Apply at naranetwork.com/age-of-AI apply. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.